89% of pilot applications that involve AI agents never make it to production.
And that's the whole show. Thanks for listening.
Not quite. I'm Mani.
And I'm Preeti. This is Bill and
And
Bet.
today we are asking whether that number should actually worry you or whether it's just what every new technology looks like on its way up.
Here's what's coming: why the failure rate is high, why Money and I don't actually agree on what it means, what to build if you got a pilot running right now, and whether either of us would bet money on this number
So let's
change.
get into it. So here's the headline. Depending on whose research you trust, whether it's Gartner, Forrester, MIT, the failure rate for agentic AI pilots that sits somewhere is between 77 and 95%. And most people, they land around 88 to 89%. So there's no fixed number really.
Yeah, that's not a failure rate. That's actually a coin flip that lost the coin, literally.
Basically, yes. I'm gonna edit it. But here's what gets left out of every scary headline. The failure isn't coming really from the model. It's coming from what happens after the demo. Usually we build a pilot on very clean and curated documents. It's a very small set of the documents. But when production shows up, the data volume is very high, and your data might be some scanned forms which are scanned at weird angles, maybe handwritten notes and stuff like that, right? So it's not really a very clean flow when you actually take that pilot into production.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the AI didn't really get worse, right? It's about reality showing up. You see so many pilots, and then you understand what's the plan and what's the reality.
Exactly. And that's a very expensive way of learning, to be honest. And I'll quote a number from Composio. Composio is basically a company which built custom connectors. So based on their agent report, when they started, they had like 5 senior engineers who spent like 3 months building custom connectors for a particular pilot that they were, building at that time, and it got shelved. So that's literally like $500,000 in salary that got burned before anyone had anything working. And I think now the salaries are even higher. So senior engineers might even cost way more now.
That's a rough performance review, I
Yeah,
must
but
say.
this is my actual take, right? Look at who doesn't fail. What does success look like? The companies who have successfully built the agents, what do they do to reach into production? Read their reports. What is your return on investment will look like, let's say around 5 months down the line? What are the functions that are paying you back, right? So there are certain patterns that you can figure out based on what other successful companies have done, because there is a 10% that was successful. What did they do? Learn from their success. And just to cite, like Cognizant, I heard they opened an entire EMEA unit in July specifically to help those companies cross that gap. And that's a company which is literally betting on real money, just on the other side of this number.
Yeah, but I don't think, that's the hard part, right? I think we are describing the same 88% completely different, and I want to push on that. So you're framing this like a maturity curve. Cloud did this, agents are next, mobile, did this in the past, and now we are looking at agents. I don't really completely buy the comparison. For example, like cloud and mobile failed early because the infrastructure genuinely wasn't ready yet. With agents, they are failing because companies are skipping the most important and the boring part on purpose. And because the boring part doesn't get you a standing ovation in your all hands, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
planning
yeah,
for
and
infrastructure.
that's fair. But there is another thing. Like when we were talking about cloud and mobile, they failed because of the infrastructure wasn't ready. Look at the agents. Like now, even if we have, do we really have the infrastructure? Like, do we have the GPUs and the capacity? Because agents are literally these large language models who are really, really large, and they take actions, right?
I
Yeah.
understand the Yeah, I understand the capacity norms, but it's not just the infrastructure scalability, right? I mean, let's talk about the pilots first. It's not just pilots are dying that quietly. I mean, Gartner did some research on it, and they say that over 40% of agent AI projects are actually funded and running at risk of getting cancelled by 2027. That's not still maturing. I mean, we're not talking about infrastructure although here,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about the research that a fully funded project where they have everything at hand and yet getting cancelled. So that's already built and still getting
Yeah,
killed.
because of what though? Like why is it getting killed? That's a bigger question.
Yeah, let me double down on this. Even the ones that reach production, they aren't safe. When I say they aren't safe, meaning that you have to look at the governance and security and other aspects. Roughly 22% of the deployed agents report actually negative ROI in the first year in. And when Forrester actually dug into why, they found that it wasn't the model. Like 40% said they did not have like real success criteria defined upfront, and a third of these said that the agent never had proper access to the tools or data they needed. Right? We're talking about data readiness for building agentic AI solutions. And the third of them said that the evaluations, all of the checkpoints and balances just drifted and nobody noticed until it was too late. I mean, pretty much like, I can give you examples where people like, hey, I built this pilot and I have this accuracy and precision. This looks fantastic. Now I'll just go launch it in production. But that doesn't work that way. It's not the reality, right?
Yeah. And most of this also doesn't have like sometimes observability. So the company actually built it, they shipped it, and then never really defined what your definition of done is or what the success will look like.
Exactly right. And only, today, if you look at the industry, I think the research says there's only 1 in 5 companies have a really mature governance model for this kind of stuff, right? You're talking about having all the bells and whistles defined upfront, having a clear success criteria. Have say data quality is actually their blocker,
Mm.
right? Before even gets agents get built. What is the data hygiene, data governance, data quality,
Mm.
data management, right? In and out of the systems, data consolidation. My take, this isn't infrastructure catching up to the ambition that you said earlier, like, there's capacity problems. I think this is a bigger problem than that. This is companies choosing type to do homework and then calling the bill an adoption curve.
Yeah. So let's say if whatever are like I agree with you in a lot of these things like governance, evaluation, observability, and there is hype. Everyone just wants to move faster and faster, and they're not doing that boring work or things like governance. And I think governance deserves its own topic also. So that would be something very interesting. So for our viewers or the listeners who are listening to this right now, right, who have got either an agent pilot which is running right now or somebody who wants to start one. So what would be the build of the week that we can share with them? Preeti, you start.
Yeah, I'll start with number one, writing a success criteria down before a single line of code. I mean, I'm taking the business perspective, right? We talk about a lot of things, like, business KPIs. What does my customer need? And start with that. Start with, not just an improve efficiency kind of data point, but having an actual a number that says this is my success
Yeah,
criteria.
and they can have like definitions and all. Okay, so number two, I think you also touched based upon governance and data. I would say we also have to scope the agent's access, data access, very tightly, because sometimes we give like broad permissions to the agent, like just in case, and that's exactly the kind of access creep that can show up in the failure data. And that's one of the things that OWASP is calling it out as excessive agency, where agent has more access than the actual user who logged into that application. We have to scope the agent's access or data access very tightly to minimize that blast radius and only give access that is absolutely needed.
Absolutely. With autonomous agents, that's the
Yes.
key. All right. Number three, build the evaluation infrastructure before scaling, right? Not after something breaks in front of the customer. You're actually having the checks and balances of what it looks like in pilot. How do we launch it in production? What's the scope of the launch? How many customers? How do we manage the data drift? What are the evals and checkpoints? What's the rollback strategy? All of that needs to be built in before we start scaling into production. So you're actually building a framework around, or a playbook, I'd say rather, for evaluation of infrastructure before scaling.
Absolutely.
That's number
Absolutely.
three.
Absolutely. And I think we also need to do the effort and the cost estimation for evaluation specifically, because I was just giving this demo to one of the customer and they were like, the kind of evaluation you are asking me to do that might cost me way more. than my actual agentic application running in production. So because they didn't do any effort estimation on the evaluation side of the house, right? Because LLM as a judge might actually cost you. When to add humans in the loop, that might actually slow your application. So but there are techniques around that, and I think again evaluation is another thing which is a own topic of its own, but to plan for it is super important. And I think because you have touched based on
Yeah.
evaluation, I would say number 4 would be observability. And I know I'm mentioning it again. Whenever you mention evaluation, in my head, it's observability. Because I'll tell you why. Because observability gives us eyes to figure out what the agent is actually doing. What tools is it calling? What is the audit trail? What permissions it is assuming on behalf of a user? Um, and it also gives you like traces, specifically when you have like multi-agent use cases where you are
Mhm.
literally scaling your application. So observability is super important, and people think about, oh, I'm just doing a pilot, why do I need observability right now, right? Maybe I can think about it when we go into production. But no, you have to figure out the observability right away so that you can build your evaluation on top of it, right? How can you evaluate something that you cannot see? So I think they go hand in hand, right? What do you say?
100%, they go hand in hand. In fact, I think observability is there, like, it's like the horizontal vector. You got to, it's an invisible layer that goes on everything, whether it's um, you know, setting up your agents in security, access control, governance, infrastructure scaling, everywhere. You got to have your eyes on every bit of infrastructure, everything end to end in that life cycle. So totally agree with you. It's the most important piece. And then that gets me to number 5, right? You don't want to trust your pilot accuracy as is. We have data changes, your new learnings, recommendations, the feedback that you get from your agent itself or from your customers. So you're piloting this. You got to think about that this is going to change. It's an ongoing cycle, right? You need to have to bake in how your data set is evolving over time. So I'll give you like a recent example. I've looked at one of the customers who's done their agents work this year, and they've built like really rolled out almost to production. And what they built their data set, they did not have a clean demo data set. Meaning that, I mean, they had a very clean set to start, but they didn't have a good cycle of when to refresh their data set or demo data set, and then readjust their accuracy based on the data drifts that they were noticing. So I think these are simple things, but really important when you launch into production. So I think pilots' accuracy needs to be verified, and that should be the validation has to happen on a regular
Yeah, and when
basis.
you are giving example of like manufacturing agents, right, their environment is also changing, and then there is a data around that environment that needs to be taken care of. So absolutely, and if you look at 95% accuracy on 100 clean test cases is not the same as 95% accuracy on 10,000 real ones, right? So absolutely, the same accuracy percentage that you are getting on your demo or a smaller set of test cases or data might not hold true in production when the data volume is really high. And I think the last one, I mean, there are so many of them, but I think these are the ones that are most important that we are talking about based on our experience. So I think one of them, which people usually miss, is having a single threaded owner. Because lots of these
Mhm.
projects get buried in the handoffs like pilots, right? Uh, there is one person who built it, there is another person who's running it, and during these handoffs only these pilots projects might die. So I would say not a team, just assign one single threaded person who can coordinate among the entire team, and knows the goals of people who are building it as well as who are running it, and how things should be working. I think that becomes even more important than ever.
Yeah, I call them the data champions, right? You need to have a data champion who's going to own it and manage it over time and has a clear that's when you have I would say a well-oiled machine to run with
Yeah,
this data
I think
sets.
champion is a better word, because if you use owner, then everyone, if the project fails or goes haywire, then people will be like, "Oh, you are the owner, you will
Yeah.
be responsible." So it's not about name calling. I think champion is the right word, because then it's more about yes, I'm championing this project. I have that responsibility that I'll do all the coordinations and the handoffs. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to the bets of the week. I'll go first. I bet that 88% will be under 50% by the end of 2027.
I'll take that bet against you. I don't think we have a well-defined governance structure that actually catches up that
Yeah,
fast.
that's true.
That's what I'm
That's true.
noticing. All right, my
Okay.
turn. I bet most companies still won't have a real governance model for this a
Oh
year from
yeah,
now.
absolutely. And I'm not betting this one against you. That's a fold for me. So last one. Okay. I bet that next AI panic headline will not be about agents at all.
I'll take that. I think agents stay the headline through the next year at
Yeah, I
least.
think time will tell.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's do a quick rapid fire. Both of us. Okay. One word.
Okay, go.
Go. Agent handles customer refunds with zero human
Fold.
review.
Agree. Autonomous agents are coming in. All in.
All in for me. Refunds are low stakes, so I
Yeah,
risk
but
it.
not in all
All right.
industries. Imagine airline and yeah.
Not in all
Apart
of this.
from excluding compliance industries or regulated industry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
regulated. Yeah.
So
All right.
agent gets
Uh,
write access to a production database.
oh, this one it's a hard fold. I'm not taking that.
Yeah, you should not because and let me argue this one, right? Because it cannot be a fold just because there is no audit trail, no rollback. So even if you have one prompt that writes something bad into a production database, that can literally leave the whole database in a very bad state for further transactions. So I don't think like whoever will be greenlighting this would have thought about like the blast radius and all. And even if you're doing it, you should have like reversibility plan, right? Rollback. That Preeti, I think you touched upon it. Okay. Oh my God, we are in the rapid fire. Yes.
Yeah, I think governance. Well, I agree. All right. Yeah, I'm not touching that either. All right. Let me get to the next one. Agent written code ships without a human reviewing
All
it
in.
first.
Autonomous agents again. Uh, because human is the main factor that actually slows you down. So all in actually.
Fold. Wait,
Yeah.
really? I mean, I'm skeptical about humans not being in the loop for agent written code. I'm still not ready
Yeah,
for that.
because look, I review the PRs, but the code review has already been done by the agents, right? So, but when I do the code review of those, feature requests from junior engineers, I'm relatively less careful now because I know that there has already been one scan that has been done by the agent, right? So that was my take. We will see. We'll see. Time will tell.
All right. I'll go with the next one. Company cancels its whole agent program within 12 months.
I think that's all in, all in.
For me, it's all in two. And I'll say this because it all depends. Like AI, when you say data ready, then it's AI ready. And if you can stick to that, I think there may be some success. But without that, this is the easiest one to say.
That's this week's bet. If you want more of this, hit subscribe. It actually helps more than you would think.
Yeah. Same time, same day. See you then.